All right. It is 4 o'clock, so I'm going to get us promptly started. Be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. This presentation is called Flipped Internships, Reimagining Student Work-Based Learning Experiences. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This presentation is being recorded, and links to the recording and the slide deck will be available on Go Virtual website at https://cte.innovatesd.org/go virtual. You will find a link to today's slideshow in the chat shortly, so take a look for that, and we're going to get started. All right, so today's speakers are myself, Nicole Morrish. I'm a K-12 pathway coordinator in the San Diego Imperial region. Mr. Tony Morrow is an advanced engineering and computer science teacher at Canyon Crest Academy in San Diego District. We'll be hearing from him, as well as Ms. Camille Swinsky, who is a BCK programs facilitator, and which is an environmental science outreach company. And we also have Evelyn Para, a junior at Sage Creek High School, who will be speaking about her experiences working with BCK programs. She is in Carlsbad Unified. So thank you to our speakers for joining us today. Our goals for today's presentation are we're going to look at different types of work-based learning, and we're going to reimagine work-based learning internships using what we're terming as a flipped approach. We're going to share some examples of flipped internships, namely at Canyon Crest Academy and in Carlsbad Unified. And we're going to share how important it is to employ some of those essential skills, or what they call employability skills, when you're having these work-based learning experiences. We'll also give you some resources and get your feedback as well as questions. So let's look at the traditional definition as we get started here. What is work-based learning? So according to the work-based learning framework, it is a continuum of intentional activities and experiences designed to expand the boundaries of the classroom and prepare students for future career opportunities. Activities and experiences begin as early as pre-kindergarten and continue through post-secondary. So we've seen some frameworks that look like this, or these continuums. It doesn't necessarily look the same when you're doing a work-based learning experience in elementary versus in middle, high school, or post-secondary. So when we look at the beginning grades, the K through 5 years, that's when we look at career awareness. So learning about work, your work-based learning experiences might look like workplace tours or guest speakers. A lot of kids go on experiences like BizTown, for example, where they learn about different jobs and what those entail. When you get into the middle school years, then you get into more learning about work. So you might take strengths inventories to find out what things you are really good at or have a mindset to be really into. And you might do things like virtual interviews or career fairs. We're going to focus our talk today on these high school and post-secondary experiences where you're learning through work or you're learning for work. So this is where we get into internships, we get into student-based learning enterprise and practicums, apprenticeships, things where you're applying what you've learned in these pathway classes to a work setting. So we're going to focus on this area today when we talk about work-based learning. Now, many of you have seen this list here of the different types. So I did say I was going to mention that. You'll notice in this list, we've got some of them in black here, and then we've got some down here in blue, and these ones have numbers by them. So does anybody, you can answer this in the chat, or you can just unmute. Can you tell me why, or do you happen to know why some of these down here are distinguished with a number? I'll give you a minute. If you don't know, that's okay, but I'm trying to get an idea of my audience here. Some people may have that information. If you've heard anything about work-based learning reporting, then that might come to mind. No? All right, well, you'll see over here, we have the California dashboard, which is a place where they report work-based learning experiences. And the ones that you see here in blue down at the bottom, these are the ones that as of fall 2022, they're considering using that data in the dashboard. So internships, student-led enterprises. Okay, great. I'm seeing, yep, That's right. So it's what's being measured. It's the data that's being reported to the schools, to the districts through CalPads or, affecting your CCI data and your college and career index. And so all of a sudden there's a little bit more emphasis on these types of experiences because not only are they good for kids, but they're actually going to be factored into the data that people use to look at a school district's performance. All right, so why is it important? Let's build a case here. There's wonderful resources in San Diego County. I'm going to provide you with some of these at the end where they collect data on priority sector reports. And a number of years ago, back in 2015, there was a wonderful priority sector report that was done, which looked at 5 different industry sectors: advanced manufacturing, clean energy, healthcare, information communication technologies, or what we call ICT, and life science. And in those reports, they collected data on what were some of the workforce gaps and challenges in these key sectors, and then what could we do to ensure a strong workforce? So what could we do to address these gaps? And when they did this data, they made these wonderful visuals and they listed the top 5 or 10 things that people could do to address these gaps and really prepare a strong workforce. And if you look here, here's advanced in manufacturing. And right there at the top, they suggest adding internship or work-based learning experiences so that people have the correct training and increasing the number of public or private partnerships. So that was for advanced manufacturing. When we look at clean energy, same thing, different industry sector, but the same recommendations were made when they asked, many employers across the region, please increase the amount of on-the-job work experience for students and please address the need for these strong soft skills. Same thing with healthcare. They said, please provide relevant work experience, address the need for soft skills. And then same thing with our ICT and life sciences. You can see here, this made the top 5, provide relevant work experience, address the need for soft skills, increase opportunities to obtain work experience, understand what working in life science sector entails. So that was several years ago, and there have been a lot of movement within the region to address that. But even as recently as 2019, that data still suggests that this is a need. So this is a newer priority sector report. And this indicated that 51% of employers across the region are challenged when they're looking to find workers with work experience. And 89% say that they require work experience for employment. So that's almost 90% of these jobs. So if you're not offering this to students in terms of giving them that experience, they're really going to be hard pressed to be ready for jobs. So why aren't we doing them, right? I've built this case. I don't think I have to convince you that it's an important thing. So why aren't they happening? What are some of the challenges associated with incorporating work-based learning into CTE learning? And I'm sure you can come up with these. I'll give you a minute in the chat because there are quite a few. Think about if you know teachers or you are a teacher that wants to do this, what is preventing you from doing this? What are the barriers? So we've got businesses require security clearance. Yep, exactly, particularly in engineering. We see that in cybersecurity as well. Time, yes, for sure. Transportation, yes. COVID regulations, yeah, COVID's made it quite interesting recently to allow any type of in-person work-based learning. Vaccinations for EMS, any healthcare profession, exactly. It hasn't been mentioned yet, but when you talk about things where there's safety factors like welding or construction, you've got an even larger list of liability forms. Yep. Okay. So there are definite factors that factor in, right? I heard a lot of these mentioned. So you've got work permits from the industry side, you've got facility resources, and then they want, someone that feels comfortable managing that liability and managing students when they're on industry sites, right? From the school district side, of course, time, I heard that mentioned, liability insurance from the school, transportation, and then funding. And that was one of the things brought to my attention from Tony Morrow, who you're going to hear later. In his experience trying to set up engineering internships, schools get funding for having the students on campus. So when they're not on campus or they're leaving early to do these internships, that does affect funding. They're not always, in agreement with how you set those up. So speaking of which, I am going to turn this over to Tony Morrow. He is, as I mentioned, the advanced engineering teacher at Canyon Crest, among other things, previously working for Qualcomm. And he is going to share with you a method that he uses, which he calls the flipped internship model with his students. Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'm going to stop sharing here so that he can share screens.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Let me do the switch. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that and you can hear me all. All right, so as Nicole mentioned, thanks for the handover. My name is Tony Morrow. I teach, in addition to advanced engineering, mostly engineering and computer science from intro all the way up through the advanced courses at Canyon Crest Academy in the Carmel Valley area of the San Diego Union High School District. And so I've been doing this, I was in industry prior. I've been teaching for about 9 years. I've been doing the flipped internship model. I think this is my 4th year doing it. And so what is it? At a high level, basically what we're trying to do is provide these experiences, these work-based learning experiences to the students, and basically implement these internship opportunities in the classroom. So I'll get into a lot of the detail of how we do it in the coming slides. But here's a little bit more detail on what is the difference between, say, a traditional internship and a flipped model. What we're trying to do is color code it, and I will get a little laser in here so I can kind of point some things out. Everything that's kind of the traditional internship that has been around for years is in yellow, and then everything that we're proposing in this flipped model is in the blue. The CalPADS definition of an internship is to provide those opportunities in a supervised environment and then have relevant practice for a future career. And so my particular channel or my particular lane that I'm working in is in the technical side of applied STEM or engineering and computer science. And so as far as that traditional internship goes, those are typically off campus. The students are going to apply their learning from the classroom into a workplace setting. So they're off campus in the facility, applying their talents there. And then what the teacher is doing is facilitating that essentially that channel so that the students get that connection. And then the industry partner, though, is the one that does all of the managing of the students' work. So they're kind of responsible after we do the handoff. So what I tried to actually do this at Canyon Crest Academy years ago, and because of several of the problems that were called out by Nicole earlier, and that were pushed up in the chat as well, I was discouraged from doing that. And so I said, okay, well, let me do this this model where we try to do some things on campus, where the students are applying all of their skills in the classroom setting. And then the industry partner is going to facilitate and mentor our students in teams. And then what the teacher will do is manage the work on campus. All right, and so as far as the sequencing goes, what we have here, I show a couple shots. This is actually from my classroom, where we will partner with and we do it with local industry, and we recruit mentors. And what they do is they help coordinate the engineering projects. The engineering team are the students, and they'll execute on the project. And then the manager is the teacher. So the team manager is the teacher, that's me, and I will track their day-to-day activities. And we'll talk about what kind of the benefits of those are in just a bit. But that's basically, then this screenshot here is a virtual meeting with our mentor for one of the projects that we have. As far as the classroom setting goes, you can see this picture here is showing several teams. So it's pretty active in my classroom. This year I have 7 projects going on simultaneously. That project-based work is during class time, so it's during the normal school hours or school day. And then what the industry partners will do is they're going to be providing us feedback. They mentor the students, so we have periodic status updates and calls with them, and then they're going to provide us feedback and guidance, and then they'll also help me with evaluating the performance of the students, so they can help me with providing those rubrics such that then I can assess the students and kind of get a performance indicator. We have lots of projects going on here. I won't go into a lot of the detail here, but it goes from things that are fairly benign. One of the projects that I do is essentially a cable transmission harness system. And so you're maybe thinking, well, that's just a bunch of wires, not a big deal. But within that project, there's lots of stuff going on that we address. A lot of the soft skills that Nicole mentioned with respect to what a design process is. And so with that very simple project where we're just transmitting data across a cable, we have mechanical enclosures being designed. We have electrical components that are being designed and put into circuits. We have software that's being developed, and we have test scripts that are being created in order to validate the performance of this very simple cable that's transmitting data. So it's pretty simple in some cases, and then it gets very complex in others, where we're doing things that are like web developing and machine learning, where we mine data, we do robotics and automation. So lots of different types of projects that we cover. Pretty busy slide here, but what I wanted to show was where this particular course that we've created, it fits within my CTE pathway, for example. This is towards the end of the pipeline of the related experiences that Nicole went over earlier. So it's sitting kind of at the tail end of here, where you have the work-based learning and then the career prep. So I've placed this at the capstone portion, or the capstone phase of my pathway. And all this other stuff in here are just the introductory course and then our concentrator course for that particular pathway. So all the CTE pathways, right, have an intro, a concentrator, and a capstone. And so we have several courses that the students can take in preparation for this capstone. But this one I call Advanced Engineering, and it will incorporate this flipped internship concept, where we are covering not only the engineering process or just the technical portion of it, but we are covering the soft skills. We're networking with the industry, and we're working on these directed study projects. All right, so this is even a busier slide, and this goes through, I tried to capture here what the timeline looks like for a typical 18-week semester that I have at CCA. Now, CCA is a block schedule, a 4x4 block. So we basically cram a year's worth of traditional hours of a typical course into a semester, into an 18-week semester. So this is basically equivalent to a full year of a normal course. And so I put a timeline up at the top, and I kind of track through what we're doing over that time. At the very beginning, I'm doing lots of coordination with an industry partner, but about the first third up to about the halfway point in the course, I'm covering all of those soft skills that are needed to basically execute on the project. And this is a thing that a lot of the students lack, in that they have their individual silos of studying. If it's STEM-based stuff, they're studying their math and their physics, but they don't have a whole lot of opportunity to apply it. And so when they have that opportunity to apply it, it's not only just applying it to making a really cool gadget that they can go sell. It's really, what does that process encompass that allows you to take this kind of vague concept that might be presented to an engineer on, hey, I want this gadget to do this thing. And it's not been, the whole thing behind engineering is that it hasn't been invented yet. So you're being asked to invent something. And so coming up with this concept and being able to execute on a project that goes from generating some requirements all the way to testing it and delivering it is part of that whole soft skill area that goes through all of these topics up here. So these are things that I will be covering during the first about half or so of the course. I'm also doing the pre-course coordination. And what does that mean? Well, that means I am coordinating with the industry partners, and we're trying to figure out what is a good, relevant project, a work-based type project that's relevant, and that is within the scope of the students' capabilities. We don't want to give them something that's too hard that they'll never finish, but we also don't want to give them something that's too easy too. So it takes a little bit of coordination with the industry partner to make sure that we're kind of hitting the sweet spot with that. So that I do in the beginning of the course, and frankly, I do that a little bit prior to the course starting out. I'll do that a little bit in the summer, and sometimes I do that, prior to the semester kicking off. Once we have identified what those projects are, then we'll do a kickoff. So again, while I'm hitting the students with the content related to those soft skills and the design process, then we are kicking off projects where we'll have a meeting with the industry mentor or the liaison to discuss what that project is, what the definition of it is, and then what the schedule is, what the kind of the rough schedule of when we want to have things basically done. And we try to fit those into our timeline here. For me, it's the 18-week semester. Now, it's almost always never hits right at the very end. So sometimes it spills over and we have to do a handoff to another team, but sometimes it finishes and we're moving along at a good clip to get it done in that time period. So we try to manage that as part of our coordination in the beginning, but then when we kick off, then we've defined what that project is and what we're trying to accomplish with it. I will then assign the project team. So I'll have a class full of students, maybe 35 students that I'm trying to split up into different teams. And I will normally take a survey of the students to get if I don't already know them, to get a feel for what their skill sets are. Again, given that this is the capstone class, they have taken some of the engineering. They'll usually have some math and physics background. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, what exactly can you do, and what would be the most appropriate project for you, in addition to their interests. So I try to match them with a project that they would be interested in working on. And then I've also had the industry mentors interview the students too, to sort of screen them. So again, that gives them some experience with some of those soft skills. Once we get past the assignment, then we're kind of hitting the ground running with the project time. And I spend a lot of time, and I'm in it right now in the middle of our semester with project time. So the kids are working on the projects every day. They do status updates with their mentors, typically once a week, sometimes once every other week. And we do that via conference calls. And sometimes the mentors will come on campus. The last year and a half, they haven't. We've done it all virtually. And it's worked out actually quite fine. I'll talk about that when we talk about some of the benefits in just a bit. Once we are at the point where we have completed the project, or like I said, if it turns out that we spill over into the next semester and the students disappear from the class, then what we'll do is we'll create a handoff. And that handoff would be documents to be able to give to the next team that will be taking it from there. Very applicable to industry. I did this many times when I was an engineer in industry, where you go on to another project and somebody has to take over your stuff and maintain it. So it's a very relevant exercise to go through. But in the event that we get to the point where things work out timing wise, then we do what's called acceptance testing. So the kids will write what's called a test plan, and then they verify the functionality of the project that they've worked on with the industry mentor through this process called an acceptance test. Again, a very industry standard thing that's done, where you'll sit with a customer and you will go through all of the requirements that you've established early on in the project, and you verify through these different tests that in fact you've met those requirements, and your customer will, or in our case the mentor, will check off for each one of the requirements that you created. So that's the whole timeline. It's busy. We do lots of stuff, and it's at times chaotic in the classroom because we're running around. I'm running around trying to figure out, okay, what are these 7 teams trying to do? But what I find is that the kids, when you empower the kids, they really rise to it, and they're pretty impressive the way that they'll form their team and move forward with stuff. All right, so how do we address those traditional intern challenges that Nicole mentioned earlier? We have these, and these basically echo what everybody was putting up in the chat as well. Things like security clearances. These are the documentation type things that I ran into as well when I was trying to get engagement from industry partners to host students on their facility. They'd say, well, work permits are a pain. If you have a student in your class that's under 16, that we can't do that. And we got to give them access, so they have to they need a clearance, or they have to have some sort of background check, and there's some privacy issues there. We don't have spots for them. We don't have a cube for them to sit in. We don't have a machine for them to work with, a computer. And we don't want to manage them, so we can't allocate time to be managing them the whole time that they're on, and make sure that they're doing the right thing and not wandering around the facility all day, as well as things like insurance. So those are all problems that I ran into. And so what we get out of doing this stuff on campus is that we don't pay the students, all right? So there's nothing that's negotiated in terms of a pay schedule. This is done for the experience, and they put this on their resumes and their college apps. And then and by doing the work on campus, we kind of mitigate all of these issues that came up earlier. Similar to what was talked about with the school district as challenges, the schedule for the student is, again, it's minimized because the student is doing things during their normal class. It's a class they take during normal school hours. You don't have, students nowadays they're doing so many things. They're so busy. They have so many extracurricular activities that they do after the school day that they don't have a whole lot of time to go off to a facility. This is done on campus, so it helps with that. As far as also with transportation, getting the kids back and forth, they're usually on their own at that point if they wanted to go off campus for an internship. So again, because we're on campus, it's not a problem. The insurance, if something happens, everybody gets sued, right? So by having kids on campus, we minimize that risk of having kids kind of leaving the campus and traveling to another facility. And then as far as the funding goes, again, this was something that was a big discouraging thing for me, or I was discouraged in pursuing a traditional internship. And it was, kind of frankly, put to me that, hey, if your kids are leaving campus in the middle of the day to go to an internship, we lose funding for them. And so we rather them be on campus. And so there's a real world issue there. All right, so what are some of the challenges with this model? And there are some, and I've been doing, like I said, I've been doing this about 4 years. I continually evolve it, just like all teachers evolve their courses over time. So there's always issues that come up. But I would say that these 4 are probably the biggest ones that I face, and that's the largest one really is finding serious industry partners. This is for whether you're on a traditional or flipped. I think finding somebody in a company who is taking this seriously and will allocate and help motivate the students is definitely a challenge, because typically this kind of stuff gets put to the back burner when the other stuff hits the fan at their company, right? I mean, this will be a lower priority. And so finding a serious industry partner is a challenge. What I found was that I look for partners who, through things like my advisory meetings and stuff like that, and through CTE, I look for partners that have outreach built into their corporate culture. So, it's kind of like a top-down thing. If your CEO or if the C-level staff at a company really embraces outreach, then you're probably going to be pretty successful. If it turns out that you're talking to somebody on a block party and they're like, oh, hey, I'm an engineer, I'd like to help you out, that is kind of a red flag to me, because it usually means that they're excited for a little bit, and then that sort of fades, and maybe other things will take priority. So I really look for companies that have outreach built in, and this is where Alex and the team can help us with connecting us to industry partners who then we can kind of look for that. The other thing, working around industry schedules, that's a hard thing to deal with, again, because this will, regardless of whether you have an outreach built into the corporate culture or not, when it comes down to the corporate profits, those will take priority, and so sometimes this stuff gets put back to the burner. And so the way I get around that is I understand enough about the project to move it forward. So in the beginning stages where we're trying to scope out these projects, I make sure that I know a little bit about what's going on there so that I could push it forward if needed. Now, I don't necessarily take it over, and I don't know everything about what my students are doing on the projects, but at least I can kind of push it forward as a manager. And then the other thing with working around their schedules is to try to block their schedule when you want to do status meetings specifically. And what I'll do is I'll send them meeting invites, and I get it put down onto their calendar so that we block out their time, because otherwise they'll forget, or they'll be preempted by other things. And at least if it's on their calendar, I get a better chance of getting them to engage. Managing multiple classroom projects, again, it gets chaotic. Not going to lie on that. Running around and trying to figure out what the students are working on, and how do I assess that they're not just sitting there. How do I hold them accountable? I use task planning tools. Trello is one that is a free tool that implements an agile process called Scrum. It basically is like having little Post-its on a whiteboard that you put a task on, and the engineers or the workers pick up that task and they work on that task, and when they're done, they move it to the done column on the whiteboard. So that's again, real world stuff. That's how it used to be done in the old days before we had these kind of tools. But now with this kind of tools, we can set up, and this is this little graphic that's really tiny and you probably can't see it. All of these vertical channels represent what's called a list, and inside those lists are those little white boxes, and those are the individual tasks. So inside there, you can open those up and you can assign them to students, and then you can get feedback from the students on what they've accomplished and their status along the way, what their issues are. They can tag people so you can get notified. And so this is a good way for me to be able to keep track of projects and then also collect evidence that they are actually performing on in the class. And then finally, equipment needs or funding. A lot of times you need special test equipment, or you need that that cable harness that I was mentioning earlier to be able to send data through it, and you need the things that is going to generate the data. If you don't have that kind of stuff in your classroom, then you're going to need to order it, or you're going to need to borrow it. And so what I found was that, again, as part of that planning process with the with the industry partner is to try to identify that equipment as soon as possible, early in the semester, and get it on order. And we've done a couple different things that with my class at CCA, where I've ordered it through our school has a foundation. We order it through the foundation, and the companies will provide donations to the foundation. So it's basically a wash then. I've also done it where I've sent the company a list of things to order, and then they've done it through their purchasing mechanisms. And so whatever works best is fine, as long as what you want to do is make sure you get things on order quick, so that you're not waiting for parts and kind of in a holding pattern. Or establishing a lending program from the partner. I've gotten parts and test equipment from our industry partners as well. They brought them to my classroom, they drop it off, and then I give it back, return it back at the end. All right, so what are some of the benefits, just to kind of recap on this? The students, the CTE participants, they get the work-based learning experience, real world, relevant projects. They get exposed to the design process, not only from the content that I present to them as far as that soft skill stuff goes, and not just writing a little program that will do some function. Probably what's more important really is to get some experience with that whole design process, going from a concept all the way to delivery, where you are executing on an acceptance test procedure is really crucial and super valuable in industry. I can tell you just from my own experience. It gives the kids networking opportunities, so they meet people, right? They get to meet the mentors. Mentors will come, they'll mingle with the other mentors as they are kind of coming through the classroom and visiting. So that gives them that networking opportunity. And then it makes it flexible in terms of things like, hey, I can't get onto that facility because it's a secure facility and I need a security clearance, or they've shut down because of a pandemic. And we had this class going all last year without a hitch, really. We switched over to fully online, and we were able to actually give the students I think was a good experience, even through all of the craziness that was going on last year. Industry partners, they get good PR. They want, all companies want positive community PR, and if they have an outreach program, this is a way to do it. It helps sometimes with execution of unstaffed projects. Sometimes a lot of projects that are lower priority get pushed to the back burner in companies because they have limited number of resources that they can allocate to their high priority projects. And so these ones, like maybe some little R&D type project or a test equipment type project, are kinds of ones that we pick up that maybe aren't on a critical path, but they're just not being serviced because it's not the super high priority for the company. Eliminates oversight, insurance, labor costs. We talked about all of these challenges. And then pipeline to a future workforce. We have the industry partners that I work with, they track the students. They have these couple of students down in here have worked for the company that they did the project for in my class, and they've worked for them as interns through their college years too. They're both juniors now, I think, in college, and they've worked for the company as college interns during that time. And so that's always a good thing too. The companies will tend to track then those interns, and then they'll want to hire them once they graduate. So it's a good way to connect to the workforce. All right, I think that is it for me, and I think I'm going to hand it back over to Nicole. So I'm going to stop sharing
Great.
here.
Thank you. And Tony, you had some great questions that popped up in the chat. I know Christine had asked some specific things. There's a couple people that had to duck out and are going to watch the rest of the recording. We're going to turn it over to our next industry folks, our next person that's presenting. Hold on, let me pull up the right thing here. And before I do that, I just want to touch on some of those things that you had just mentioned that were the, oh, darn it, sorry. Give me a minute to actually share the right screen, right? There we go. So I want to touch on a couple of those things that you had mentioned in terms of, got to catch you up where you were here. In terms of those employability skills, and then I'm going to turn it over to our other folks at BCK. So these employability skills that we have, that Tony mentioned, are super important to any career, whether it be engineering or STEM or whatever. And Tony, I'll give you a minute while I'm going over these to look at some of those questions, and then we can answer them at the end. You know, there's been a study that was done recently in San Diego County where they asked employers for thousands of companies what they felt were the most important soft skills, the single most important soft skill or set of skills that they needed for hiring. And then based on that data, and this was a 2020 report, they grouped them into 6 categories. So there was 25 skills that were mentioned most out of everyone. And out of those 25, they grouped them into 6 categories. And you can see here that these are the 6 categories. And I have this as a resource for you at the end. It's a linked resource for you guys if you want to read the whole report. It's really good. But you can see 67,127 job postings said that effective oral and written communication was their single most important thing that they were hiring for. They said, you know, we can teach the technical things, but this we can't really teach. So I wanted to highlight another company that is working with schools to do this flipped approach, and they really emphasize these soft skills or these employability skills because this is what, you know, companies are hiring on. So I'm going to turn it over to Camille Swinsky, who is our representative from BCK Programs. And Camille, you're up.
Hi, thank you. I was gonna lead in by saying, like, Tony was so high tech and we're gonna go really low tech right now. We're gonna really punch into those soft skills. My name is Camille Swinsky. I'm a managing partner of BCK Programs, and we provide environmental internships for schools K through 12th grade. We partner with schools and school districts and cities on getting out the information that cities need out with regard to their climate action strategies. And we didn't know, but I guess for the last 5 years or so that we've been in business, we've been doing flipped internships. Who would have known? I didn't know that was the name of it. But we kind of embed in with the classroom, and we provide these experiences to students. Our company focuses mostly on environmental issues and climate and pollution control issues. But it involves like major solving of problems. So problem solving, it's very heavy on the public speaking, and you'll see we brought Evelyn with us. So she's kind of a testament. She is a wonderful example of how we press our students to speak not only to industry experts, but to other folks that might be interested in knowing what we're all about. We help cities meet their regulatory compliance, and that might sound a little weird, but I'll give you an example to explain it. Some of the programs that we work with, we're asked to do because a law has been passed through the state. An example of that is SB 1383, which is a law that requires cities and schools to reduce their amount of organic and food waste by 75%. And they're comparing it to the 2014 rates that they have. And, you know, they're maybe at a loss at how to do that, but they're on the hook to do it. So we come into a school, we work always with students, and we work with them as young as, I had a group of 4th graders today, 3rd graders, all the way up to high school. And we explain to them the laws and what we have to do and the implications of what happens when food waste goes in the landfill. And then we come up with solutions with them that we actually have to put in place at the city level and the school level. And then we have our students, our best ambassadors out in the community also to get the residents to continue doing this good environmental stewardship work. So you can go ahead to the next slide. And I do want to leave enough time for Evelyn to speak. So I don't want to brush over this too quickly, but I think this slide is a pretty good indication, and we can talk about what we do. We have all sorts of programs that we cover. Watershed protection, which in particular is the one Evelyn is going to talk about. We have climate action programs, everything from energy conservation to waste diversion, organics recycling, as I mentioned. We focus on water use, water conservation, water infrastructure, water management. If it impacts the environment, we cover it. And a little bit unlike Tony. So Tony, our program and Tony's program are similar, as you can see in that bottom part of the slide, where we cover a certain amount of things, the same kind of stuff. But then also very different, because Tony is doing all of that work. And when I was listening to him today, I was really paying attention and taking notes on everything Tony does to put this internship into place in his school. And it just seems overwhelming. And if you're a teacher out there thinking about like, oh, I don't know how I would ever do all of that and match it up with the schedules and block. What my company does is we have more of a turnkey program. We come to you with all of that all figured out. And we either embed with you in the classroom and do it through a 6-week program, or we hand you over it all done where you might not even have to know the topic expertly. You don't have to necessarily be a science teacher, and you can go through our program and then get to the same exact result where we're out in the community making a real world solution. So, we start off just like Tony would do, like we introduce the issue, we introduce whatever the law is, what the history is surrounding the issue. We take the students then through, there always has to be an analysis of some type of data. So we're collecting data. In the case of Evelyn's studying stormwater, she collected runoff and tested it to see what pollutants might be in there in her neighborhood. And then she had to learn why those pollutants were harmful. And then she had to learn about what other people are doing all over the industry. And this is a soft skills spot. She learned about what cities do to try to get the word out, to change behavior so that there's no pollution going into the storm drains. And then they implement their BMPs. Now, COVID did kind of get in the way of that with Evelyn, but this is Evelyn doing her BMP right now. She's talking to you guys about what her idea was. And she'll also tell you how she most recently spoke at a water quality conference and told those folks her idea. And she also was able to speak with the city of Carlsbad and tell them her idea for a youth workshop, and they loved the idea. And so we are currently in the process of bringing Evelyn's best idea to solve water pollution to fruition. And then, as always, we always make sure that our students have an opportunity to share what they learned and talk about it in the community and build their speaking confidence and competence. So, and this is another example. So you guys are all part of our program right now. Evelyn is going to be speaking to you about what she's doing. And before I hand it over to Evelyn, I just want to give her a shout out because she is an amazing student. She came up with a really great idea of how to engage other students her own age about getting interested or even just learning about watershed pollution, because I feel like maybe it's not super common that kids know about it. And she came up with a great idea. It rose to my attention and my partner's attention, and we really want to make it happen. So I'm going to hand it over to Evelyn, who's probably the best ambassador to talk about how this flipped internship could work, especially with regard to soft skills. And then she'll answer any questions after if you have them.
All right, Evelyn, you're up.
Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Parr, and I'm a junior at St. Trick High School. I had the privilege of being a SWIP intern during February 2021. As many of you know, this global pandemic has been difficult for everyone, but being a student attending online school was an unusual experience that changed my perspective on education, especially science. As someone who has loved science since the beginning of middle school, not being able to work with my peers to collaborate was draining. For the safety of my family, I finished the 2021 school year online. Going to science every day through distant learning became tough, and having to see others doing the experiment in person rather than being able to touch, see, and feel was stressful. Nonetheless, the day that changed my life for the better. My science teacher, Mrs. Good, revealed to us that we were going to do a project with storm drains near our houses, and the best part was that we were physically going to be able to do it. To bring a little context, I love science, but the study of water has robbed my heart from the moment I was in my 6th grade classroom. We saw a video how water plays a key role in the environment and in life. Since that day, my dreams and desires are to impact, inspire, and change the world of science as I one day hope to be a hydrologist. So being able to do an experiment during the pandemic, especially a water experiment, felt like magic. To get into more depth about this magical experiment, our challenge is to find a drain in our neighborhood, observe it, then conduct a water sample to see what pollutants might be entering it. Once we collected and analyzed the results of the water sample, we had to create a way to stop the pollution we found from getting into the drain. My storm drain was a curb inlet on Cobblestone Road. The water running into it led to the Pacific Ocean. The debris I observed surrounding my drain were glass bits, concrete pieces, branches, cigarettes, and dog feces. Most of these came from the fact that there was a huge neighborhood and a huge main road. Since there was no rain that day, we had to fill up a bucket of water, toss it from the top of the street down to the drain. This is called dry weather collection. Water professionals do it all the time. Right away, we noticed the rocks, glass pieces, and dirt that were all getting picked up by the water. Then we're going into the storm drain. I collected my sample and then I went home and conducted a few lab tests. My lab results were as followed. Positive coliform, that's not good. 8 parts per million of dissolved oxygen, which is fair. 5 parts per million nitrate, again that's fair. A pH of 7, that's good. And 2 parts per million of phosphate, again that's just fair. It felt amazing experiencing what scientists do on a daily basis. I learned that dog feces is a factor in stormwater pollution. When it rains, it goes down to the storm drain and then out to the ocean. Dog feces contains a high amount of coliform, which is bacteria, which is a type of bacteria. This is one of the reasons we close the beach after a rainstorm. Since the high level of coliform in the water is dangerous for people to go in for a swim or to surf. In fact, they closed the beach for 72 hours. If you remember, my sample result from earlier, my neighborhood tested positive for coliform. After I saw the results and learned they were not what I expected, I decided I wanted to choose a source treatment solution, BMP. This is a solution that targets the source of the pollution that I observed, the people in my community. In order to not only focus on a specific drain, but stormwater pollution as a whole. My solution is to bring awareness about what stormwater pollution is to schools. I believe that students are the future of this world, and when students learn, they tell their parents, and their parents tell their colleagues. I believe schools are where the word spreads the fastest. More specifically, my solution is to create a workshop where students and parents can come to learn about stormwater pollution. In the workshop, we would talk about the impacts of stormwater pollution that I learned while being in the SWIFT program in ways people can stop furthering stormwater pollution. The reason I wanted to create a workshop is because when people tell someone about stormwater pollution, they don't know what it is, but they know the term. Nevertheless, understanding the consequences and the effect that stormwater has is more important than knowing just the term, which is why the workshop will offer a learning experience. During the workshop, I would show a slideshow about what stormwater is and show pictures of stormwater pollution for a visual representation. Afterwards, we talk about the effects of stormwater pollution and the ways that our community can help as a whole, which is picking up your dog waste, not littering, not over-fertilizing your lawn, and keeping leaves and dirt out of the gutter. Lastly, I created fun bingo cards for kids to play in order for them to learn about easy things they can do to reduce stormwater pollution, like painting murals on top of stormwater drains, or telling 5 people what stormwater pollution is, or picking 10 pieces of trash off the ground. These are fun ways that they can help. They can bring their family and friends to come help them. Furthermore, the workshop would be free to the community and all the materials would also be free due to the fact that it's all digitized. I would put the workshop on in the afternoon for students of all schools, and parents would also be welcomed. If the workshop goes well, then we'd bring it to advisory or homeroom classes by sharing the slideshows with the teachers. The teachers would then run through it with their students. They don't have to know anything about science, but if they just read it, then students can learn about stormwater pollution and the ways that they can help, and it'd all be helping the environment. Overall, I learned from the SWIT program that our world is lacking knowledge about our actions and how they affect the world we live in. When Mrs. Kathy and Miss Camille emailed me to congratulate me and inform me that they liked my idea, something in me felt that our world could be aware. They just didn't have the resources to learn, which is why it's incredible that Kathy and Camille are generously trying to help the workshop happen. They also informed me that while the workshop would take time to make happen, the bingo cards would be circulating at schools where younger kids are learning about stormwater pollution, meaning at a young age, students can become aware and change the way future generations treat our environment. Not only did Kathy and Camille like my idea, but the city of Carlsbad thought the idea I presented was a great idea and wanted to help support me. With a mix of an incredible team of support and passion, the workshop is going to be something beneficial for our community and our Earth. Additionally, I got lucky enough to be invited by the BCK program to speak at a major annual quality conference called CASCOR, which stands for California Stormwater Quality Association, about my experience and my solution. This is by far the coolest thing I've ever done. Being able to share something you are so deeply passionate about is something not everyone gets to do, which is why I'm continuously grateful that I got the opportunity. Having this all happen in a short amount of 2 months since February when I submitted my final solution, I learned a couple things that I will take with me in the future, especially in job setting. The 5 things I learned are: 1, even when you think you are done, you can always improve. 2, ideas come when you least expect them. 3, as much as public speaking is scary, it's very necessary to get your ideas across. 4, problem solving is essential. And lastly, number 5, there's always room for learning. To conclude, I'm going to leave you with a quote. Gandhi once said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." My workshop can be my small act of kindness to protect the environment. Imagine the change that can happen with all those impacts of the young innovators around the world. I know the stormwater pollution isn't something that is going to be fixed overnight, but if we take the right steps in the right direction, we can make it into something that can be achieved. Thank you for listening.
All right. Fantastic job, Evelyn. Awesome. And I'm sure everyone listening was also very moved and very impressed with your abilities as a public speaker. I want to be mindful and respectful of time, so I'm going to just quickly touch on a couple of final elements as we wrap for this evening. Evelyn kind of typifies kind of the quote I'm going to leave you with, which is: our job is not to prepare students for something. Our job is to prepare them, to help students prepare themselves for anything. And some of the things that we touched on today were learning about those academic and technical skills within the frame of an internship, the ability to engage with business and industry, exploring and experiencing potential career options, developing and practicing essential employee ability skills. Finding work-based learning such as internships can be challenging, but you're looking at a couple of examples of flipped model approaches which alleviate a lot of those challenges. And thank you for the comments I'm seeing that pop up in the chat. I really appreciate those, specifically directed towards Evelyn, because she did a wonderful job. And we did provide you, as I mentioned, with some resources here. This work-based learning summary doc will give you a descriptor of all of the different types of work-based learning that are out there. And there's a wonderful website resource called workbasedlearningcalifornia.org, which is still in development, but has great resources for teachers and educators and administrators. And here's some links to some of those other sector briefs that I mentioned earlier in my presentation. If you would be so kind as to take maybe 60 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes to fill out our survey, that would be, oh, I'm opening one of the docs, sorry about that. That would be greatly appreciated. So if you have questions, I know there were a couple questions I want to be getting to, so I'm going to let Tony answer those from Christine, and feel free to unmute, but Tony is populating the chat with our survey. And if you would take just a moment to fill out our survey, we can improve this presentation for future folks. And we thank you guys for coming. Questions? Tony, do you want to?
Yeah, I can address the one from Christine. So as far as the survey link, I don't have it. can you get it? Put it in.
Yep, I got it in there. I got you.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, Christine, you were asking, let's see, do industry partners support these projects year after year? I have, but really both. There's some that I've been working with since the very beginning. And these are the ones that, as I mentioned earlier in my talk about looking for ones that partners that have a corporate culture of outreach. The couple companies that I've worked with, that they do. They have they're from the top down. This is what they think is important, and they work through that. But I've also had several companies that I've worked with that have stayed for 1 or 2 terms, and that's fine. I mean, they come in with they want to work with us, and they'll stay for the semester or for a couple semesters, and then they go on their way. And so I've had both. The follow-up on that was, do you ever repeat projects? And so, yeah, the ones that I have worked with, specifically this company, DRS Daylight Solutions, I repeat projects almost. There's maybe over the course of the 4 years, it's been maybe 8 or 9 projects that I've worked with them on. And I think probably 6 of them I've repeated over semesters, multiple semesters, or for multiple, sometimes just 2 and sometimes multiple. And so but the way I do it though is not necessarily a repeat. It's not repeating from scratch. We do a handoff. So this is the thing I was kind of mentioning earlier, in that as part of a really valuable thing that you can learn if you want to be an engineer or a computer scientist or someone in industry where you're doing technical type work, is being able to hand off a project to the next generation, right, or the next team. That happens all the time. Projects never take, they're always being maintained, so you always have to hand them off, and so we do that. And so I will have some overlap where a new team will take over a project. They ramp up based on the documentation that was produced by the previous team, and then they can advance the project. And so I actually like to do that with the teams, just because it is very relevant. It's very real world. So that's super valuable. What tends to be the level position of many of the mentors? I've had marketing and business development people who aren't technical at all, but they're wanting technical stuff, like they want a website developed, or they want some sort of database developed to collect the information that they are pulling in from their website, for example. Probably the highest level person that I've worked with is a general manager, like a VP general manager type. But mostly it's engineers, so mostly technical people who are like members of their technical staff that will be acting as the manager for this particular area, because it's pretty focused on STEM type stuff. Do companies tend to donate materials, or their projects require certain supplies? They'll do donations, or they'll provide funding. And the funding is, I was mentioning it earlier, that sometimes I've done it where the team has created a list of things that they need for their project, the materials that they need, and we provide that to the partner, and then they go off and buy it because they have their own purchasing system in place. Or sometimes it's easier for them just to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna donate $1,000 or something to your foundation, and you can draw from there. And so I'll do that as well. And then let's see, do we ever have to manage a situation where the industry partner flakes? Yes, in fact, it's not that they necessarily flake. I mean, I've got one project this time around. The guy discovered that, or his father discovered that he has a terminal disease, and he's out. He's got to go take care of his dad. And it's like, okay, well, we will push this forward. And really, that's the reason why you do all of that soft skills thing, where you create this process of defining what the project is, what the requirements are, what the design, kind of this whole design cycle is, is that so that the teacher can actually be the manager, like the program manager, to push it forward, and you let the kids kind of work their way through it, the technical problems. I mean, they're doing research, and that's part of the class, is for them to figure out stuff. And so they're not looking for me to handhold them through stuff, and we'll work on things together. But yeah, it happens, and we pivot and we deal with it. So I've never had a real problem where it was like, oh shoot, my kids are kind of left hanging. We've always been able to get through it.